Hi there, it's Miles the DJ with Go 96.3 at the Twin Cities Film Fest. Honored to be joined with David Osit and Amy Green of the film Thank You for Playing. It's a devastating story. It's a inspiring story in a lot of ways as well. The first thing I want to talk to Amy first a little bit about the concept of having this journey filmed and the decision to have that happen. How did you come to that?
Well, David approached us and was interested in making a documentary about our creation of a video game about our son. And, we took a little bit to think about it, but really we realized that they were wanting to do the same thing we were doing. We were telling Joel's story through this video game, and they really wanted to tell that story in another medium, so it felt like a natural fit.
David, tell me a little bit about the story that we're talking about and what inspired you to reach out to Amy and her husband Ryan.
Sure, well, it's a film about Ryan and Amy, who are video game developers, and they were making a video game about their son Joel, who has terminal cancer. And I read a really brief blurb about this video game on a gaming news website that I wasn't a reader of, but a friend of mine sent me, and I thought it sounded really interesting, and just the idea of what that game would look like seemed very complex and interesting to me. So we contacted them and went out to Colorado for a 4-day shoot, which turned very quickly into 1.5 years of filming.
Oh, that's incredible. It took a year and a half.
Yeah, off and on, but yes, for a year and a half we were filming with them and the family, yeah.
Talking about the video game for a second, if I can, you're talking about how interesting of an idea this is to make a game like this for a very emotional subject. As a creator of this video game, where you're talking about something very personal, how are you able to sort of step away from that and thinking about an outside player playing the game? How did you decide what to include in it?
We explored for a while, and we had a lot of scenes that we ended up cutting, and so we did a lot of different approaches within the game, and eventually what we came down to is we decided to keep everything that really showed what it was like to love Joel, and we decided that anything else we wanted to say could wait for a different project, and that in this project we really wanted to try to show the player what it's like to care for and love a child that's dying.
One of the most emotional scenes in the movie that I've been hearing a lot about, speaking of this, is when people actually get to start playing the game. You took the game to a conference in San Francisco where strangers were playing it for the first time. Tell me a little bit about that experience for you and what it was like seeing people play the game.
Sure. Actually, my husband was the one who took the film to PAX took the game to PAX, and I actually only saw the players interacting with it when I was able to see the film. And so it was really an impactful and a beautiful moment for me to get to see those reactions firsthand. The team had described them to me because they'd been at the event, but it was really something special to actually see people play this game and cry and hug my husband and talk about people that they had lost. So.
Very emotional stuff, very powerful stuff. David, what I find interesting about this film is that it's, in a lot of ways, a documentary about a documentary, kind of, but like in video game form. How did that make the process for you either easier or more difficult?
It's rare that you are able to make a documentary where you have this visual component that goes along with it, and in this case the visual component was this animated world that Ryan and Amy and their team were creating, this animated representation of their emotional state of this time in their lives. And so typically in a documentary you're kind of relying on what you can film or what kind of footage you can collect, but we had an additional sort of entry point into the minds of this family that we were following, and that was really valuable. It also made it more, it was more of an onus on us to do well in terms of telling that story, because it wasn't our story. It never was our story, of course, but there was someone else who was telling the same story already. So how can we stay true to the film that we wanted to make while also honoring the fact that there was a documentary already being made? It was just in game form.
Continuing that a little bit, how was the process for you making this film and getting what you needed to get to accomplish it, but also respect the pain that Amy and her husband were going through?
Sure. I mean, well, Amy and Ryan were really wonderful and always told us that we could film whatever we wanted to. That it was up to us to draw the line in terms of what we would film and what we wouldn't film. And we became very close to the family, and so that was important to us to kind of be respectful of what their needs were, but also just the fact that they never really told us to put the camera down made us have to think the same way that they would have to think about what they would include in the game is what we would have to kind of include in the film, which was an interesting kind of creative challenge for us just to think about what do we want to show people, what do we want to, because there was no lines that we had to worry about crossing necessarily. It was kind of just always about what's if we're talking about an experience and documenting an experience, how are we going to honor it in the way that it can create a story that an audience can grab onto, you know.
Very, very cool stuff. Amy, I want to ask you about having David there, filming your whole process, making this film. You're kind of creating two things at the same time here, which I didn't realize going into this interview even. What was it like having David around filming this process for you? And did that in any way influence the finished product of the video game?
It was simpler than you would think, I guess, to have David and his partner Malika there filming. I think for us, we felt like all along, like when you have a child that has cancer, you're just really aware of how quickly time passes. And so I think in a way we were glad to have the film crews there because we knew that they were capturing moments that we would never get back. So even if maybe it was an emotional day or we were tired, it just didn't feel like we wanted to say, oh no more. There was a part of us that said, oh no, keep filming, Joel, like keep filming us, like just because I knew that those moments would be precious to us. And having the documentary crew there actually ended up helping us with the game because a lot of the game we rely on sound from our home videos, because once Joel died there wasn't really any way to record any new sound, and we found ourselves going back through the videos we had and trying to find audio of Joel saying certain things and doing certain things. And there were times where we thought to ourselves, who might have some audio we could use is David and Malika. And so we'd call them up and say, when we were feeding ducks, do you have any audio from that? What can we use there? So it was interesting to see how sometimes they had pieces that we could use in the game.
I want to get into this in a second with David, but my understanding is that this wasn't initially thought of to be a feature film necessarily. So when it became that, how did that make you feel? And now you're at places like the Twin Cities Film Fest and interviews, and we're talking about it a lot, getting a lot of exposure. How did that feel for you, knowing that it was going to turn into a feature film?
It's been an extreme honor for me and for my family just to know that Joel's story is being told in such a big way. I adore him, and I want as many people to know him as possible, and so seeing that his life gets to have this large of an impact is incredible. And anytime I sit in a theater and watch people get to know my son, it amazes me.
Talking about the access that you had with Amy and Ryan and being with them for a year and a half, I'm just curious to know how often you were around them. Was it fairly on and off? Was it consistent? How much footage did you get?
Sure, it was pretty on and off. We started filming in around July of 2013 and filmed for about a year and a half after that. And it would mostly be visits for us going to Colorado because we're based in New York. Malika, my co-directing partner, and I are based in New York. So we would go to Colorado or to other places where there'd be things happening, game conferences and the clinical trial in San Francisco. And just kind of combining a lot of these trips with other things and so on over the course of a year and a half as we were awaiting funding. And again, we started thinking of the film as a 10-minute short, but it gradually kind of ballooned into a much larger story the more we began filming.
When did you know that this can turn into a feature film? So much emotion. It's really heavy, the subject matter, obviously. I mean, we don't got to get into that, but just when did you have this happen, this idea where, this can turn into a feature film? When was that?
I can think of almost the exact moment, which was at the PAX Prime gaming conference in Seattle, which was the first time that people could really play the game. And seeing the reactions of people playing this video game in the corner of this crowded conference room where you would not expect to have an emotional experience whatsoever, but nevertheless, just like, people of all ages and all genders coming over and talking to Ryan after playing the game and really empathizing with him and trying to share their own experiences with him. That's kind of when I realized that not only was the game that Amy and Ryan and their team was making was good, but also had a really profound ability to affect people. And within the midst of the Green family going through this really tumultuous time, I think that the story was very evident to me at that point, that it was something that should be allowed to play out over a longer period of time and be given its credit as opposed to just a short film.
It's great that it turned into a feature film. A lot of people watching, excited to see it. Amy, I want to ask you, you had two projects based on Joel. You have the video game, and I'm sure you have some sort of release from that, the film as well. How has that been for you, just dealing with everything?
I think both projects, in a way, have been very therapeutic for me and for my husband. Once Joel died, we had to process our grief and our feelings, and we were able to make our creative project a way to kind of process those things. And the film came out before our game was finished, and so that was wonderful because we got to begin to see the impact, even as we've kind of, we're working to finish the game, and sometimes in those last couple months it can be a little tedious, but we can watch as people respond to the film, and it's very encouraging to see that people are excited about what we're doing.
I'll get you out of here on this, Amy. I want to ask you, we mentioned earlier the conference in San Francisco featured in the film, how people were playing it for the first time. Now you're seeing people watch this film for the first time, people who may not even play video games. Most may not, I don't know. How has that experience, watching people watch this film versus playing the video game, how has that experience been for you?
It's been beautiful. One of the things I love is that David and Malika took the time to capture kind of funny moments in our family and the moments where there was joy. I think that's something that people sometimes forget when they're talking about a family with a child with cancer, especially terminal cancers, that you forget that there's still so much joy, so much laughter. And so for me, when I hear an audience laugh at some of those moments that I think are funny, I love that, because it shows that even this topic is something we can talk about, and we can, in a way, enjoy together, as well as see the emotional impact. So I like to watch audiences kind of see that it's not a one-track story, but that there's a lot going on.
And David, one more question for you. Great synopsis on really the emotion of this movie, Amy, and how people are taking it in. It's been said by critics that it's one of the most important movies ever made about video games. Yet it's hardly a gamer sort of video game movie, right? It's a very heavy subject. It's very emotional, as we're talking about a lot. Has that been challenging for you to talk to distributors, audiences that may take something from this movie but may kind of hear the subject matter and be like, I'm not really into that maybe?
I think it reflects a challenge that is kind of echoed in the film, which is that people are frightened to talk about mortality in the West and in many places in the world, but especially here in the States. I think it's really difficult for us to engage with the idea of the fact that what happens to us all happens to us all, and it's very difficult to talk about, even though we all go through it somehow. And that stigma is, I think, what's really been interesting about watching the game, That Dragon Cancer, being made, because Ryan and Amy and their team are really breaking down a lot of barriers by actually positing this game in a space that is probably the least emotional space in the entertainment industry, which is the gaming world, and at least among popular perception. And to be able to say, here's this video game within that space that lets you feel something and lets you engage in an emotional experience, that's really special. It's really special that can exist. So I think that the challenge is just kind of a universal one, regardless of any medium that you're working in, whether it's film or gaming, is how do you talk about the things that we never talk about? And I'm really proud that the film and the game can bring that topic up.
It's an incredible story. The film is Thank You for Playing. Amy Green, David Osit, co-director. Amy, very brave. Thank you for sharing your story with us, David. Thank you for making it. It's Miles the DJ with Go 96.3 at the Twin Cities Film Fest.